God, I call out with hope. You will answer me. I can't see you where I am. And there's this feeling in my heart that I can't escape. Something's not right. Everything around me seems to be falling apart and calls my attention. The racing beat of my heart allows for panic and chaos to flow through my veins. God, be here with me. I find comfort in knowing and trusting you will meet me where I am. Whether this is at work, at home, while panicking in secret, or crying at night, God, I know you will meet me. I ask for you to replace this panic and chaos with your love and stillness. Help me see how everything is not falling apart and draw my attention to the things of you and your goodness. Remind me of what I can change, and may I find rest in knowing you are in control. Amen.
God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. A river brings joy to the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations are in chaos and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's army is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Come see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I'll be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress.
So here for Orchard Online and at all our Orchard sites, we are in a series called Seasons, and we're not talking about seasons like the weather changing or we are moving houses or getting married. We're talking about seasons where we go through real emotional and mental health things that are going on in our life. So depression, anxiety, loneliness, feeling like distant from God. And one of the things we're talking about, and probably one of the biggest things we'll be talking about today, and that is anxiety. And so anxiety is something that's, I think we're a little more aware of it now than before. So why is it important for us to talk about it as a church?
I would say that most people suffer from anxiety but don't know it.
Yeah.
Anxiety is something that stems from all the noise and all the connectivity that we have, and we're so connected all the time. I describe anxiety as voices in our heads, and it's a million different voices that are pulling us in different directions all at the same time, and all those voices stem from all this connectivity that we got. These voices didn't create themselves. They're coming from somewhere, and it's all the connection that we have in the news and on our phones and the people that we talk to. So I think anxiety is more prone in people's lives than they want to admit.
Yeah. I don't even really, I think one of the things we were talking about before we started filming was I think a lot of people see it as sort of like a mental illness that people deal with on a regular basis, which is true. There are people who struggle with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Constant anxiety. But there's also a lot of us who, like you said, we deal with it. We deal with it in seasons. And
Right.
we don't think about how much it impacts, mentally and like emotionally and work related, but it definitely affects us spiritually as well. Mm-hmm. But there's no roadmap in the Bible. The Bible doesn't expressly say, like, if you're anxious, you should, like, if you deal with anxiety, because it's something.
That would be great.
Yeah, it would be awesome
Yeah.
if it's like, here's the roadmap for that. But there is a text, Psalm 46, that we read out of.
Yeah.
So how does that apply to what we're talking about when we talk about anxiety?
Okay, so Psalm 46 is so good because there's two forces at work. Mm-hmm. So when you first read it, the way that I have gone about it is you just want to highlight the truths that it talks about with God, right? Mm-hmm. In Psalm 46. Yeah. So it says God is our refuge, God is our strength, God is our fortress, God can't be destroyed, he ceases all war, he breaks bows, snaps spears, right? And when you think about that, they can lead to one overall characteristic, can lead to a lot of characteristics, but the one, if we're talking about anxiety, is God is a God of peace, right? So when we get into his refuge, into his fortress, we find serenity. Yeah. When he ceases wars, that's harmony. That's peace. He's a God of peace. And so there's another force, and it's chaotic. It's the waters. It's the chaos in the waters. It's the nations that are trembling and crumbling. And so when we talk about anxiety, that sounds a lot like our minds, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Our minds are prone to chaos. They, again, talking about all those voices going in a million different directions, and we have no peace.
Yeah.
So that's where Psalm 46 comes into play. It's like, how do we get from this chaos in our minds to this peacefulness that God is readily offering to
Yeah,
us?
and it gives scenes of chaos, like mountains going into the sea,
Yeah.
which even in like ancient culture meant more than just like mountains falling into the sea. It was like the world is ending, right?
Yeah,
and we still
big
have
deal,
peace
big
because of
deal.
it.
Yeah.
So Psalm 46 is great, and it just help us. You said that it gets us an idea of who God is first. Like that's the first picture. But you're talking about how earlier that we don't even recognize it's going on a lot of times. We're not even aware of it. So why is it important for us to become aware of it, and how do we deal with it, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when we're talking about awareness of it, we need to talk about where anxiousness leads us. And again, it's in this moment of when we feel like our days are more filled with worry than they are joy. I think that there may be some anxiousness in our lives where we're more distracted by all the million things that we've got going on in our head than what we're talking about, than God's peace. And we deal with anxiousness with that, with what God talks about, which what the Psalm talks about is be still and know that I'm God.
Yeah.
Like that's how we deal with all of these thoughts in our
Yeah,
heads.
there is a great counter to the fact that like you talk about like God being a God of peace, and I think a lot of times we don't think, because when we think the opposite of peace, we also often think of war or like but like it's really just conflict. So if we're anxious, we have conflict that keeps us up at night, that allows us not to be present in the moment and stuff like that. So when He gives peace, I think a lot of times we try to fill up our schedules up more. It kind of leads me to what I was going to ask later, which is one of the things we've been trying to do is give people practical, like things that they can do, spiritual disciplines that I can do in order for me to invite that peace into my life to sort of like flesh out the anxiety that I have. So what's like something practical that if I want to be aware of it, or if I want to get rid of it, I know it's there, I want to get rid of it, I want to seek God's peace, what is something I can do?
Yeah, so you talked about the conflict, which is something that really when I've been reading Psalm 46, I've been finding like, what is the conflict? Like, why can't we get our anxiousness in contact with God's peacefulness? And I think it's a conflict between our head and our heart. It's like our heart knows these truths, right? We believe this, but our mind has convinced us otherwise, or actually distracted us from otherwise. So a practical way that we can go about that is stillness. And stillness scares the crap out of us. You know why? Because we get bombarded with the thoughts.
Yeah.
So when we talk about all these seasons that we're going through, we don't want to just highlight the season. We want to highlight the antidote. And that very much is the antidote, but it's a twofold antidote. Yes, be still, find stillness, find silence, which scares us. But in that stillness, we have to know that He is God, which is find a prayer or a word when you're in the stillness to just start picking away at all of those thoughts. And I love just from this, it's the truth of that you are the God of peace. When you're in that moment, and then all these thoughts that seem to appear so pressing and so pulling, they begin to be less convincing.
Yeah.
Because the truths of your heart are speaking louder than the thoughts in your mind.
Yeah, I think you were talking about a prayer or a word. Like, there's a lot of things that we could do, but I think even in the passage, it's like that first sentence, God is my refuge and my strength.
Right.
Like, if you could just sit alone with that thought. And I think that part of like the prayer or the word is the more helpful part of the stillness, because I think a lot of people deal with anxiety by getting home and like crashing on the couch and watching TV, which fills up, or even like reading a book, which it's not the same, but
No, I know
like
what
you
you mean.
fill up your mind with information, which even if it's not the stuff that normally makes you anxious, it doesn't allow you to like absorb and sit in the stillness of God. It distracts you from the stillness of God. So when that's over, you go straight back into like the anxious thoughts and the anxious things. I'm gonna get a little personal here, so I'm gonna ask you because one of the things that I've become very aware of is Soma. So is our bilingual church. It is moving from one place to another. It's the church that I'm most involved with in our family of churches, and so we're in a season of moving. And I'm reminded as we're talking about this about the season leading up to us launching Soma 3 years ago, and I could not sleep. And I'm asking questions as like, God, this is a bold step. Is this going to work in Tupelo? Like, and I just could not get it out of my head. And it was things like, maybe God's not leading us to do this, and I just wanted it. Or, so I remember that season in my own life, and, tapping back into those kind of things was really helpful in those moments after I kind of, like you said, became aware of it. Mm-hmm. So are there personal, people people in your family, or maybe even you, where you went through this and sort of like this helped, or maybe you didn't and it would have helped, or...
So I like what we talked about at the beginning of like anxiousness can come in all different kind of forms, and I don't want to say that I'm the poster child for anxiety because I'm not, but I do experience it. I'm a typical overthinker, and I do think that that's anxiety in my life. Mine is mostly at night when I go to bed. I can't shut my brain off, and when it's at its worst, I can't sleep. I'm just tossing and turning, and mine is more of like flashes. I just feel like everything is piling on top of me, but in a vulnerable sense is, I'm at Orchard Northside, and this is my first year, and all of these thoughts are in my head. Are we growing? Are we doing the right thing? Are we reaching people no one's reaching? And all those are just flashing and flashing and flashing all the time. And another vulnerableness is no. Yeah. I'm not good at this at all. I think we, exactly like you said, to battle the noise, we fill it with noise. And it gets us nowhere. So you'll never find me, the way I battle anxiety is music, which is honestly just more noise. It's not truthful. And you'll never see me anywhere without my headphones in, even when I'm walking through Walmart or Kroger. Because I'm scared of my own thoughts because they're going to eat me alive. And so this has been as formative for me as I hope it is for anybody who's listening, because I've got to get this practice in my head of like, what are the truths in my heart that can not delay this, but stop this for a moment. I also want to say, I don't think we're here trying to say you can just pray anxiety away and it's gone, right?
Absolutely.
We're talking about seasons here. I think the bigger pressing is, the Psalm is not saying there's not going to be a chaotic world. It's that God's peace is present in a chaotic world. Which is important to note how we deal with anxiety, is we want to find God's peace even though there's anxiousness all around.
I was talking to another one of our pastors the other day. He's talking about, he read a book about being sort of a non-anxious presence. And one of the things he said, I thought it was sort of dark, but it was sort of poignant, I think, when we're talking about this, is he said, if we ever had to go to nuclear war, you want the person who has their finger on their button, they don't want to be shaking, they want to have carefully calculated that I have no other option, this is what I have to do. That's not an absence of conflict. That's not an absence of anxious behavior or things it's just, I know, there's a calming that comes over you in the middle of that. Sure. And I think those are the kind of things that I think will be helpful. No matter if it's something that you struggle with on a regular basis, if it's something that's even clinical for you, or if it's something that you struggle with in seasons. I think one of the best things the church has to offer, and we have to offer as Jesus followers, is we really can be a non-anxious presence in anxious times. It's difficult. It's not easy. And again, we don't want to say you can just pray it away, but it's also a spiritual issue. Right. And we can fight it with things that we know are spiritual tools that have been in the tool belt since the beginning of time.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, it's not let's vanquish it. Let's cut it off quick. Yeah. And the more we practice this, I think the better we'll be on being able to tame it and not let it spiral us into a point where it's really, really spiritually unhealthy. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time. Yeah, we hope this has been helpful for you guys, and we hope that you can find a word or a prayer that goes with you. And thanks for being with us today.